The rain came in sideways, hard and cold, slicing across Main Street like it had something to prove. It was the kind of southern spring storm that emptied the sidewalks in seconds, chased stray dogs under porches, and turned the red clay dirt into sticky rivers. But no one noticed the woman behind the dumpster. She was there, like always, hunched low behind Johnson's Deli, her shopping cart covered in a plastic tarp flapping uselessly in the wind. Most people didn't even glance her way. Those who did turned their eyes fast, like looking too long might invite bad luck. They called her Crazy Edith. No one knew why. Maybe because she muttered to herself. Maybe because she smelled like mildew and old grease. Or maybe because in a town like Maple Spring, Georgia, small, slow, suspicious, anyone who looked that broken had to be broken in the head. But Malik Dawson noticed her. He wasn't supposed to be on that side of town, especially not during a storm. But the last delivery on his route had taken him further than usual, and now he was pedaling home, soaked through, hoodie plastered to his neck and sneakers squishing with each turn of the pedals. His bike tires hissed against the wet pavement. He was cold, hungry, tired, and just wanted to be home. But something made him stop. Not like a choice. Like a pull. He turned his head, and there she was, collapsed against the alley wall, shivering beneath a soggy blanket that barely covered her knees. Her shopping cart had tipped slightly, wheels caught on a crack in the pavement. One of the bags had fallen, spilling old papers and what looked like a broken lamp onto the ground. She didn't move to fix it. She just rocked back and forth, slowly, rhythmically, lips moving like she was praying or casting some silent spell. Malik coasted to a stop. For a few seconds, he just watched her. She looked like a ghost from another life. Gray skin, silver hair plastered to her forehead, hands wrapped around her chest like she was holding herself together. He didn't know what made him do it. Maybe it was the way his grandma always said, "How you treat the least of us is how you treat the Lord." Maybe it was the fact that he knew how it felt to be ignored, overlooked. Or maybe it was just that the storm was too loud, too violent, and she looked too alone. He swung one leg off his bike, kicked down the stand, and unzipped the delivery bag strapped to his back. The smell of fried chicken wafted up, warm and greasy. He'd bought himself an extra two-piece at Benny's on his way back. Now he held the bag out toward her. "Ma'am?" he called out over the rain. No answer. He stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "You okay?" he tried again. Her eyes flicked up to meet his. They were surprisingly sharp, clear, not fogged over like he'd expected. But full of something else. Weariness. Suspicion. Sadness so deep it looked like it had been carved into her bones. He knelt down beside her, holding the food like an offering. "You hungry?" She didn't say anything. Just stared. Then, without a word, her hand reached out and took the bag from his fingers. She opened it slowly, reverently, like it might explode. Inside was a chicken thigh, mashed potatoes, and a biscuit wrapped in foil. She tore into it like an animal, no shame, no pause. Just pure survival. Malik sat back on his heels and waited. After a while, when the worst of her hunger seemed to pass, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and looked at him again. "Why'd you stop?" she asked, her voice raspy like sandpaper. He shrugged. "Didn't seem right to leave you out here." She studied him, as if trying to figure out if he was mocking her. "No one else stops," she said. "Not even the church folks. Especially not them." He gave a small, dry laugh. "Church folks around here only love you if you got clean shoes and a clean past." She nodded slowly, then looked down at the remains of the food. "This is good chicken." "Benny's," he said. "Best in the county." She gave a small smile. The first sign of warmth he'd seen. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Her lips moved like she was tasting the name before saying it aloud. "Rose." He tilted his head. Not Edith. Her smile faded. They call me that. But my name is Rose. He nodded. Nice to meet you, Miss Rose. You got manners, she said, surprised. You raised by your mama? He hesitated. My grandma. My mom's not around. She nodded again, like she understood too well. That tracks. They sat in silence for a while. The rain softened to a drizzle, steam rising from the asphalt like ghosts. Then she said, You know I wasn't always like this. Malik glanced at her. I believe you. Used to have a house. Husband. A car with leather seats. You ever ride in a car with leather seats? He smiled. Nah. Not yet. They stay cool in summer and warm in winter. That's how you know you've made it. Heated leather. He looked at her differently then. She wasn't just some lost soul. She had history. Memory. A before. You got people? He asked. Had a son, she said softly. But he doesn't know where I am. I think he thinks I'm dead. Sometimes I wonder if I am. The wind picked up again. Malik zipped his hoodie higher. You want me to bring you something tomorrow? He asked. She looked at him like she wasn't sure if she'd heard right. You'd come back. Sure, he said. I can bring you more chicken. Or whatever. She smiled again. A little softer this time. You remind me of someone I used to know. He was kind, too. Didn't last. I plan to, Malik said, standing. See you tomorrow, Miss Rose. He hopped on his bike and pedaled away, the wind at his back. But even as he rode through the puddles, he felt something shifting inside him. Like something had started he couldn't explain. That night, in his room, Malik uploaded a video. Just a few seconds of footage, his rain-soaked sneakers, the echo of thunder, and a blurry shot of a shopping cart under a plastic tarp. His voice, quiet but clear, spoke over the clip. Ever meet someone everyone ignores? Might be a reason to stop and listen. Then he added, almost like a whisper. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? He didn't know it yet, but that post would change everything. By morning, Rose would be gone. And the truth about who she really was would begin to unravel. The next morning, Malik woke up to the familiar hum of his alarm clock, the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the curtains of his small bedroom. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a notification from TikTok. Your video has over 500 likes. He blinked, half awake, rubbing his eyes as he reached for his phone. He had posted that short video last night, barely thinking about it. It was something off the cuff, something he did on a whim after leaving Rose in the alley. It felt like a small thing, just one more act of kindness in a town that didn't notice people like her. But apparently, someone had noticed. His phone lit up with comments. Who is this lady? I see her around. She's always there, but no one talks to her. Can you help her? Where is she? The questions kept coming, and the numbers kept rising. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if it was because of the unexpected attention or the fact that people actually cared about Rose. It felt strange to him. Strange in a way that made him uncomfortable, like something was happening he wasn't quite prepared for. As the morning wore on, Malik didn't have much time to dwell on it. He had school to get through. His backpack was stuffed with homework he'd barely started, and his stomach growled as he slipped into his shoes and grabbed a granola bar. He was about to head out the door when his grandma, who was sitting at the kitchen table, eyed him suspiciously. You're quiet this morning, she said, her voice gruff, as always. What's on your mind? Malik hesitated. He didn't want to mention the video, or Rose, or the strange feelings bubbling up inside him. His grandma had always been the practical type, she'd raised him, after all, and her advice was usually simple: work hard, mind your own business, and stay out of trouble. Malik wasn't sure how she'd take the idea of him getting involved with someone like Rose, especially after all the things people in town said about her. Nothing much, he lied. Just school stuff. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press him further. Alright, well, you've got to catch the bus. Don't be late. I'll be here when you get back. Malik nodded and headed out the door, his bike waiting for him by the driveway. It wasn't far to school, and the fresh air helped clear his mind as he pedaled through the quiet streets. The town of Maple Spring always felt sleepy, like time moved a little slower here. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, but no one knew much of anything about the people who lived on the fringes of it all. At school, Malik tried to focus, but it was hard. His mind kept wandering back to the alley, to the woman with the haunted eyes and the name that didn't quite fit. Rose. During lunch, he checked his phone again. More comments. More people asking about Rose, asking where she was, how they could help. Some of them even suggested calling the police or the town's social services, but Malik knew better than that. People like Rose didn't end up in the system because of their choice. It was the system that had failed them first. Yo, Malik. You good, man? Malik's best friend, Tyrone, pulled up a chair beside him in the cafeteria, snapping him out of his thoughts. Tyrone had been his friend since middle school. He was big, loud, and never shy about saying what was on his mind. Yeah, I'm good, Malik said, stuffing his phone back into his pocket. Just thinking. Tyrone frowned, taking a bite of his pizza. About what? Malik glanced around the lunchroom, feeling the weight of his secret press down on him. He couldn't explain why he felt drawn to Rose. It wasn't like him to care about people no one else bothered with. But somehow, he couldn't shake the image of her sitting there, alone, ignored by everyone, and he wanted to do something about it. I met someone, Malik said quietly, avoiding Tyrone's eyes. Well, I think she's homeless. But she's different from the others. Her name's Rose. Tyrone laughed, but it was a nervous laugh, like he didn't know how to take it. Man, you're not thinking about taking her in or something, are you? No, Malik said quickly, shaking his head. It's just. I don't know. People treat her like she's invisible, like she doesn't even matter. And You can't save everybody, Malik, Tyrone interrupted, his voice quieter now. You know that, right? Malik didn't respond. He didn't want to hear it, didn't want to hear the truth that was probably right. He wasn't a savior. He wasn't equipped to help Rose in any meaningful way. But for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she looked at him, like someone who had been waiting, just waiting, for someone to notice her. The rest of the day passed by in a blur. Malik barely paid attention in class, his thoughts consumed by Rose. After school, he went straight to the alley behind Johnson's Deli. His bike tires hissed against the wet pavement as he pedaled, his heart beating faster with each turn. When he arrived, the spot was empty. His stomach dropped. He circled the alley twice, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, but Rose was nowhere to be seen. For a moment, he thought he'd missed her. Maybe she had already left. Maybe she'd found another place to sleep. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. He pulled out his phone and checked TikTok again. The video had over 1,000 likes now, and more comments were flooding in. Everyone was talking about Rose. They wanted to know where she was, what happened to her. It was like a ripple in the water, small at first, but growing. And Malik was caught in the middle of it. That's when he saw something new, a comment that made his heart stop. I know who she is. She's not just some homeless lady. She's Rose Finsley, the millionaire who disappeared a few years ago. Malik's hands froze. He read the comment again, his mind racing. Could it be true? Rose Finsley. The name rang a bell. There had been rumors, stories about a woman who had vanished after losing everything. But who would have thought that the woman sitting by the dumpster, eating fried chicken from Benny's, was the same person? He felt a chill run down his spine. What had happened to her? How had she ended up here, on the streets of Maple Spring, with no one recognizing her? And why had no one said anything before? The air felt different when Malik woke up the next morning. It wasn't the typical haze of a sleepy town, the sun shining lazily over Maple Spring. It wasn't the usual drone of the morning routine. He woke up, grabbed his phone, and immediately checked his notifications. There it was, sitting at the top of his feed, Rose Finsley. The millionaire who vanished. His heart pounded in his chest as he clicked on the post. The comment from last night haunted him. I know who she is. She's not just some homeless lady. She's Rose Finsley, the millionaire who disappeared a few years ago. Malik felt the ground shift beneath his feet as he read through the post. Rose Finsley had been a name that once floated through the gossip columns and news channels of Maple Spring. It wasn't often that something big came out of this sleepy town, but the disappearance of a local millionaire. That was the kind of thing that stuck with people. People talked about her for months. Some said she'd lost everything in a bad investment. Others whispered about a scandal involving her husband. But no one knew for sure. All Malik knew was that one day, she was everywhere. The next. Gone. And now, here she was. Sitting on the streets of Maple Spring, eating fried chicken, ignored by everyone. He tapped the screen to read more. The comments section was flooded with speculation. I remember her. She owned that big house on the hill. Her husband was a real estate mogul or something, right? Yeah, they disappeared overnight. No one knows what happened to her. Some people think she went into hiding after the divorce. Wait, isn't she the one who gave all that money to the homeless shelter before she disappeared? I saw a news story about it once. The more Malik read, the more questions he had. It felt surreal. The woman he had seen yesterday, the one who had looked so broken and lost, was a person who once had everything. The kind of wealth that could make you untouchable. The kind of power that could change lives. But now, she was invisible. He couldn't get his mind off her as he went through the motions of his day. School was a blur. His mind kept circling back to Rose. He couldn't stop wondering, how did she end up like this? By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Malik was already on his bike. He didn't bother stopping at home first. He went straight to the alley behind Johnson's Deli, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to know if it was really her. When he arrived, the alley was empty. The tarp-covered shopping cart was gone. He glanced around, trying to catch any sign of movement. But nothing. It was as if Rose had vanished into thin air, leaving only the damp pavement and the lingering smell of fried food. Malik's stomach churned. He felt a sense of urgency. What if something happened to her? What if she was in trouble? He checked his phone again. There was no new information. Nothing that would explain where Rose had gone. He stood there for a few minutes, trying to make sense of the situation, but nothing came. Frustration started to build inside him. He wasn't the type to give up, but this was different. He had a connection to Rose, a connection that no one else seemed to care about. No one else had noticed her, not really. He was about to leave when he heard the faint sound of footsteps behind him. Looking for someone? Malik spun around, startled, but relaxed when he saw it was Tyrone. His best friend stood there, arms crossed, a bemused look on his face. You always show up out of nowhere, man, Malik said, trying to hide the sudden rush of relief he felt. Tyrone chuckled. I could say the same about you. What's up with you? You've been acting weird since yesterday. Malik didn't answer right away. His mind was still on Rose, and now that Tyrone was here, he felt like he might spill everything, the mystery, the millionaire, the strange connection he felt to her. But he hesitated. He wasn't ready to explain it. Not yet. I'm fine, Malik said, forcing a smile. Just thinking. Tyrone raised an eyebrow. About that lady, huh? Malik looked at his friend, surprised that Tyrone had noticed. What do you mean? You've been posting about her on TikTok, right? Tyrone gestured at Malik's phone, which was still in his hand. I saw your video. You've got people talking, man. More than 1,000 views already. They're all asking who she is. Malik swallowed. He hadn't expected it to blow up like this. But now that it had, he couldn't back away. He felt a pull to figure out who Rose really was, to understand how someone like her could end up on the streets, abandoned by everyone she knew. I think she's the woman who disappeared a few years ago, Malik said, finally letting the words spill out. Her name's Rose Finsley. She used to have everything. A mansion, money, a family. And then one day, she was just gone. Tyrone's eyes widened. Wait, you're serious? Rose Finsley? The millionaire lady? Malik nodded. I think so. It's the same name. The same woman. But no one recognizes her. They just ignore her. Tyrone's expression shifted. He looked at Malik like he was seeing him in a new light, like he hadn't realized just how much Malik cared. Man, that's crazy. But you can't save her, you know that, right? Malik nodded, even though part of him didn't believe it. He didn't have a plan, didn't know how he could help Rose. But he had to try. He couldn't just walk away, not when he knew who she was. I'm going to find her, Malik said quietly. I have to. Tyrone didn't say anything for a long moment. Finally, he shrugged. All right, man. But don't say I didn't warn you. Malik didn't answer. He was already turning, heading down the alley, his mind made up. He wasn't about to let Rose slip away again. This time, he would find her, and maybe, just maybe, he would find out what happened to her. The next few days were a whirlwind for Malik. Every time he checked his phone, there was more buzz. More people wanted to know about Rose. More questions. More theories. It wasn't just the usual high school gossip. This was different. Malik could feel the growing pull, the weight of something big brewing. And he couldn't ignore it. It had been 3 days since he saw Rose in the alley. He couldn't get her out of his mind. Something about her stuck with him. The way she looked at him, like she was waiting for something, for someone to help her. He didn't know if it was the millionaire angle, the fact that she was once someone of immense wealth, or if it was just the way she seemed so out of place, so lost. Either way, Malik knew he had to find her. He had to get to the bottom of this. After school, Malik went straight to the alley again. The weather had turned colder, and there was a bite in the air that made his breath visible in the evening dusk. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. But this time, when he arrived, something was different. The alley wasn't as empty as before. Rose was there. She was sitting on the same old wooden crate, a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her eyes gazing into the distance, as if lost in thought. She looked thinner than Malik remembered. Her once carefully styled hair had become wild and unkempt, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked fragile, like the world had worn her down to nothing. Malik hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, for the confrontation, or whatever it was that might happen next. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't some knight in shining armor. But something deep inside him told him that this was bigger than him. That Rose's story was something he couldn't ignore, no matter how difficult it might be to face. Rose? Malik said softly, taking a few tentative steps forward. Her head snapped up, her eyes meeting his for the first time in days. For a second, Malik thought he saw something in them. Something like recognition, but also something like fear. Rose looked at him with a guarded expression, as if unsure whether she could trust him or not. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice low and raspy, as though she hadn't spoken in days. Malik swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. "I'm Malik. I saw you a few days ago. In the alley. I wanted to talk to you." Rose didn't say anything at first. She simply looked at him, sizing him up. Malik couldn't read her face, but he could feel the tension in the air. It was like she was deciding whether or not she should tell him the truth, or whether she should push him away. And for a moment, Malik felt the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. But he wasn't going to back down. "I know who you are," Malik said quietly. "I saw the comments online. People are talking about you. About who you were. About Rose Finsley, the millionaire who disappeared." At the mention of her old name, Rose flinched. She looked away, her expression hardening. For a moment, Malik thought he had made a mistake. He shouldn't have brought it up. But before he could apologize, Rose spoke. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice sharp now, more forceful. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know who I am." Malik's heart sank. He didn't want to push her away. He didn't want to make her angry or upset. But he couldn't help but ask. "I just want to help," Malik said, his voice steady. "People are asking about you, Rose. They want to know what happened. Where did you go? Why are you here?" Rose's eyes softened for a moment, but then they hardened again. She stood up, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders as if to shield herself from the world. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "I didn't choose this," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't choose to disappear. I didn't choose to lose everything. But that's what happened. One day, everything I had, everything I worked for, was just gone." Malik's mind raced. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Rose Finsley wasn't just a woman who had fallen on hard times. She was someone who had lost it all, someone who had been forced into a life she never wanted. He wanted to know more, but he also knew this wasn't something she was going to open up about easily. It was personal. It was painful. And she wasn't ready to share it yet. "Do you want to talk about it?" Malik asked gently, his voice filled with empathy. "I know it's hard, but you don't have to be alone. There are people who care." Rose shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her lips. "People care when it's convenient. People care when they can look at me and think they understand. But they don't. No one knows what it's like to lose everything. To have the world pull the rug out from under you." Malik nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't know what it felt like to be in her shoes. But he knew what it felt like to be ignored, to feel like no one saw you. He had experienced that his whole life, especially growing up in a small town where people were quick to judge others without ever understanding their story. But this? This was different. Rose wasn't just a woman on the streets. She was someone who had been everything, someone who had been on top, only to fall to the bottom. "I'm sorry," Malik said, his voice sincere. "But you don't have to be alone. You don't have to stay out here. You can get help." Rose's eyes flashed with something, anger, pain, maybe even hope. She took a step closer to him, her gaze intense. "You think you can fix me, Malik? You think that just because you care, you can change everything that happened? You can't. You can't fix what's broken. You can't make it go away." Malik took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. "I'm not trying to fix you, Rose. I'm just trying to be here. To help however I can." There was a long pause as Rose studied him, her expression softening slightly. She seemed to be considering his words, considering him. Finally, she spoke again, this time with a vulnerability that struck Malik to his core. "You don't understand," she whispered. "But maybe you're right. Maybe I don't have to do this alone." For a brief moment, the air between them felt lighter. It wasn't a solution, not yet. But it was a start. Malik nodded, offering her a small smile. "I'm here, Rose. You don't have to face this alone." Rose didn't respond right away, but Malik could see the change in her eyes. The hardness had faded, just a little, and in its place was something more fragile, more human. "I'll be back tomorrow," Malik said quietly. "I'll bring some food. And if you need anything, I'm here." Rose didn't answer, but she gave him a faint nod, and for the first time in a long time, Malik felt like maybe he was on the right path. He didn't know where this was leading, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let Rose face it alone. Not anymore. The next day, Malik returned to the alley with a sense of urgency, but also a sense of quiet determination. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening. Rose had been silent, guarded, yet there had been a crack in her armor the night before, just enough for Malik to see a glimpse of the woman behind the wall of pain and defiance. He knew he had to keep going, even though he had no idea how he could truly help. All he could do was show up, be there, and listen. As Malik approached the alley, he noticed something different. Rose's usual spot on the wooden crate was empty, and the blanket she had wrapped around her shoulders was gone. For a moment, panic seized him. Had she left? Had she gone back into hiding? Was she in more danger than he realized? His heart raced as he stepped further into the alley, eyes scanning every corner for any sign of her. He spotted a small figure crouching behind a dumpster at the far end. It was Rose. She was bent over, rummaging through a cardboard box, searching for something. Malik hesitated for a moment before calling out gently, "Rose?" She didn't respond at first, but he noticed her shoulders tense up, as if she had heard him. After a beat, she slowly stood up, turning to face him. Her face looked even more worn today, darker circles under her eyes, her clothes more ragged than before. She hadn't spoken to anyone, not even Malik, since their conversation the night before. "I brought you something to eat," Malik said, holding out a bag with a sandwich and a bottle of water. "You didn't show up at our spot, so I thought I'd come check on you." Rose eyed the bag warily, but didn't move to take it. "I'm fine," she said, her voice quiet, as if the words hurt to say. She turned her back on him, reaching back into the box again. Malik stood still, not pressing her for an answer, but not leaving either. He had learned enough from their brief interaction to understand that pushing Rose too hard wouldn't help her. She needed to come to terms with whatever happened in her past, and maybe, just maybe, he could be the one person to help her through it. He waited in silence, watching her search through the discarded items. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Rose sighed, a deep, exhausted sound, and turned back toward him. "I'm sorry," she muttered, avoiding his gaze. I'm not used to this. I'm not used to people caring." Malik's heart broke a little at her words. The woman in front of him, once so full of life, so full of promise, had been brought to a place where she no longer knew how to trust anyone. Not even him. "I know," Malik said gently. "But that's why I'm here. I don't want anything from you. I just want to help, Rose. I know that's hard to believe. But sometimes the people who want to help the most are the ones who've been through the hardest things." For a moment, there was a flicker of something in Rose's eyes, something vulnerable. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment, then glanced at the food he offered. "You don't know anything about me," she said, but this time, her voice was softer. She still wasn't ready to let him in fully, but Malik could feel that she was starting to crack. He wasn't going to push. Not yet. "I don't," Malik admitted. "But I want to." You don't have to tell me everything right now. But if you ever want to, I'm here. I'll keep showing up. Rose didn't say anything in response, but Malik saw her glance down at the sandwich. Her stomach growled loudly in the quiet alley, and she looked up at him with an almost embarrassed expression. Malik smiled a little. I'll take that as a yes. She hesitated, then slowly took the sandwich from him, sitting down on the edge of the dumpster and unwrapping it. Her hands were shaky, and Malik noticed the slight tremor in her fingers as she brought the sandwich to her lips. The simple act of eating something, of taking care of herself, seemed like a distant memory for her. Malik sat a few steps away, giving her space but remaining close enough to let her know he was still there. It was a slow, painful process. He could see that Rose had spent so long suppressing her own needs, hiding behind the walls she had built up, that something as simple as eating seemed like a struggle. As she ate, Malik couldn't help but wonder what had happened to her. What had caused her to fall so far? He didn't expect answers today, but the thought lingered in the back of his mind. There was more to Rose's story. He could feel it. Eventually, Rose finished her sandwich. She wiped her hands on her clothes and sighed. "You're right," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know anything about me. But I guess I can't keep pretending like I don't need help." Malik's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure what she meant by that, but he knew this was a breakthrough. This was the first time she had acknowledged the possibility of help. "I don't know how to fix what's broken," Rose continued, looking down at the ground. "But I'm not who I used to be. I used to have it all. Money. Power. A family. A life. And then, it all fell apart." She paused, the pain in her voice raw, before adding, "I didn't choose to disappear. But I had no choice. I had to leave. I had to start over." Malik's heart ached for her. She wasn't just some homeless woman. She was someone who had been forced into the shadows, someone who had lost everything and had no one to turn to. "I can't explain everything now," Rose said, wiping a tear away from her cheek. "But I promise you this. I didn't want to be like this. I didn't want to disappear. But that's what happened. And I've been hiding ever since. Hiding from the world, hiding from myself." Malik stayed quiet, giving her the space she needed. He didn't want to push her further, but he also didn't want to let her go back into the shell she had been living in. She was starting to open up, and Malik knew that was a good sign. "I'm here," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm not going anywhere, Rose. Whatever happened to you, I'll help you find a way to move forward. You don't have to face this alone anymore." For the first time, Rose looked him directly in the eyes. There was a flicker of hope there, a faint glimmer of someone who hadn't given up, even though the world had given up on her. Maybe I don't have to do this alone," she whispered. Malik smiled softly. "No. You don't." Malik hadn't expected things to change overnight. He knew that Rose had been living in the shadows for a long time, and trust wasn't something that could be handed over so easily. But when he left the alley that evening, he had a feeling that things were starting to shift, even if just a little. The next few days passed in a blur. Malik continued to visit Rose in the alley after school, bringing her food, checking in on her, and simply sitting with her in the quiet moments. Rose was still reserved, still reluctant to speak of her past. But Malik could see small changes. She was beginning to talk more, to share pieces of her story in bits and pieces. It wasn't much, but it was something. By the end of the week, Malik felt like he was starting to understand her more. Rose wasn't just a homeless woman. She was a survivor, a woman who had been broken and remade over and over again, someone who had lived in luxury and lost everything. What haunted her, though, wasn't just the loss of money or status. It was the people she had lost along the way, the people who had betrayed her, the people who had taken everything from her, and the people who hadn't even cared enough to ask her story before writing her off. But there were still so many questions left unanswered. Malik knew that Rose was keeping something from him, something big. Every time he tried to dig deeper into her past, she would close off, change the subject, or simply go quiet. It frustrated him, but he wasn't giving up. One afternoon, Malik decided to change things up. He brought a small notebook with him and sat down beside Rose in the alley. It was a small, simple gesture, but he thought it might make her feel like she had some control over the situation, some sense of normalcy in a life that had been anything but. "Hey," Malik said, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking. You ever try to write stuff down? You know, just to get your thoughts out. Sometimes it helps." Rose looked at him with a puzzled expression, as if the idea of writing down her feelings was as foreign to her as the concept of normal life. But Malik held out the notebook, encouraging her to take it. "I don't know," Rose replied, her voice tight. "I don't think anything I have to say matters anymore." "You'd be surprised," Malik said softly, offering a reassuring smile. "Sometimes it's not about what you say, it's just about getting it out. Even if it's just for you." Rose hesitated, then reluctantly took the notebook from him. She turned it over in her hands a few times, her fingers grazing over the smooth cover before opening it to a blank page. For a moment, she stared at the white paper, the emptiness in front of her mirroring the emptiness she must have felt inside. Malik could see her thinking, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't know what to write," Rose muttered finally. "That's okay," Malik said, nodding. "Just write whatever comes to your mind. It doesn't have to be perfect." She bit her lip, still unsure. Then, slowly, Rose began to write. The pen moved awkwardly across the page at first, as if she hadn't picked one up in years. But then the words started to flow. Slowly at first, then faster as she seemed to get lost in the process. Malik watched quietly, giving her the space she needed, but feeling a quiet pride swell in his chest. She was opening up, even if it was just to herself. By the time Rose stopped writing, the sky had started to darken. Malik noticed how the weight in the air seemed to lift just a little. She hadn't said much to him, but something had shifted, something small, but significant. "How do you feel?" Malik asked, breaking the silence. Rose sighed, looking at the notebook in her hands. She didn't immediately respond, but her face softened, the tension easing from her shoulders. "I don't know. Better, I guess," she said quietly. Like I've let a little bit of it go." Malik smiled, relieved to see the change, no matter how small it was. "That's good. Maybe you'll write more tomorrow." Rose didn't answer right away, but for the first time in a long while, she gave him a small, hesitant smile. "Maybe." The next few weeks passed with a delicate rhythm. Malik continued to bring food, checking in on Rose and offering her whatever small comforts he could. Slowly, Rose started to trust him more. She would tell him stories from her past, bits and pieces, as if she were testing the waters. She spoke of her family, how they had been everything to her, before everything fell apart. She talked about her old life, about the luxury, the parties, the endless wealth that seemed so far removed from the world she now inhabited. It was clear that she had been a woman of influence and power, someone who had been envied by many. But then the betrayal had come. It wasn't just financial ruin, it was personal. Her closest friends had turned on her, her business partners had stolen from her, and her family had distanced themselves, unable to deal with the fallout. Rose had trusted the wrong people, and they had destroyed her. Through it all, Malik listened. He didn't push her to share more than she was ready to, but he could see the pain in her eyes as she spoke. He could see how much she had lost, not just in terms of money, but in terms of trust, love, and belonging. One evening, just as the sun was setting and casting long shadows in the alley, Malik brought Rose something different. It wasn't food this time, but something he thought might help her take another step toward healing, a map. Rose raised an eyebrow when he handed it to her. "A map?" she asked, confused. Malik smiled. Yeah. I've been thinking. Maybe it's time for you to see the world again. There's a lot of places out there. Places where you can start over. Start fresh. Rose looked at the map for a long time, her fingers tracing the lines of different countries, different cities. Her face softened, as though she was picturing a life beyond the alley, beyond the pain. I don't know if I can, she whispered. It feels like everything I used to know is so far out of reach. It doesn't have to be a big leap, Malik said gently. It can be one small step. But you don't have to stay in this place forever, Rose. You can move forward. Even if it's just one day at a time. For a long moment, Rose said nothing. She just looked at the map, lost in thought. Then, finally, she looked up at Malik, her eyes searching his. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. Maybe it's time to leave this place behind. Malik's heart lifted. He didn't know what the future held for Rose, but he knew one thing for sure, she wasn't the same woman she had been when he first met her. She had taken the first steps toward rebuilding her life, and no matter how long it took, Malik was going to be there to support her every step of the way. The following weeks were a mixture of quiet progress and mounting tension. Malik had kept his promise to Rose, showing up every day, bringing her food, talking with her, and slowly chipping away at the walls she had built around herself. Rose was still cautious, still reluctant to fully trust anyone. But Malik noticed the subtle changes in her, her eyes softened when she spoke, and her posture was less rigid, as if the weight she had carried for so long was finally beginning to lift, if only a little. Despite all the positive steps, Malik could sense something was off. Rose hadn't said much lately about her past, about why she had disappeared from the life she once knew. She'd given him pieces of the story, enough to understand that she had been someone important, someone people had relied on. But there were gaps, questions without answers. Malik had learned that Rose was afraid of talking about what had happened, and each time he brought it up, she would shut down. Still, he respected her boundaries. But the sense of unease lingered. The more Malik tried to understand, the more Rose retreated into herself. Then, one evening, everything changed. Malik had just finished his homework when he received a call from Rose. Her voice was strained, almost frantic. Malik. I need to see you. Right now. It's urgent. Alarm bells rang in Malik's mind. Rose never called unless something was wrong. His heart started racing as he grabbed his jacket and rushed out the door. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was about to tell him would change everything. When he arrived at the alley, the usually quiet space was filled with a strange energy. Rose was sitting on the crate, her head bowed low, her arms wrapped tightly around her body. For the first time in weeks, she looked utterly broken. Rose? Malik called out gently, his voice filled with concern. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. Malik, I don't know what to do. They found me. They're looking for me again. Malik froze, his mind racing. Who? Who's looking for you? Rose's voice trembled as she spoke, each word carrying the weight of a long-forgotten nightmare. The people from my past, the ones who ruined everything. They don't want me to be found. They want to finish what they started. Malik sat beside her, trying to calm her down, his mind spinning with questions. He had known Rose had a troubled past, but hearing her say it aloud, that something or someone was actively hunting her, sent a chill down his spine. They can't just come after you like that, Malik said, his voice firm, but unsure. What do you mean by, finish what they started? Who are they? Rose's gaze hardened as she looked at him, her eyes dark and filled with a mix of fear and fury. They're the ones who took everything from me, my family, my reputation, my wealth. They're powerful. They don't care who they hurt, as long as they get what they want. And I'm the last thing standing in their way. Malik didn't know what to say. He had no idea who these people were, but the way Rose spoke made it clear that they weren't just some distant figures from her past. They were still out there, still very much a threat to her. "How did they find you?" Malik asked, trying to piece things together. "I thought you were careful. You've been hiding for so long." Rose's lips trembled. "I thought I was. I thought I could escape them. But I was wrong. They have connections, Malik. People who can find anyone. Even someone like me." Malik's heart ached for her. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like, living in fear of people who could destroy everything with a snap of their fingers. "What do they want from you?" Malik asked softly. Rose's face twisted with bitterness. "They want me to disappear for good. To stay hidden so they can keep control of everything I left behind. They don't care if I'm alive or dead as long as they have what's theirs. And they'll do whatever it takes to make sure I stay in the shadows." The silence between them was thick with tension. Malik felt a knot of anger form in his stomach. How could anyone do this to another person? How could anyone tear apart someone's life like this and leave them with nothing? Rose didn't deserve this. "I'm not going to let them hurt you," Malik said firmly. He didn't know what he could do, but he wasn't about to sit by and watch her suffer. Rose shook her head, her face softening for a brief moment. "Malik, you don't understand. These people, they're dangerous. They have power. I can't let you get involved in this. I can't drag you into my mess. You have your own life, your own future. Don't waste it on someone like me." "I don't care about any of that," Malik said, his voice filled with determination. "I care about you. And I won't let anyone hurt you. We'll figure this out together." Rose looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to see if he was serious. For a moment, it seemed like she might argue, might push him away like she had done before. But then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we'll figure it out. Together." Malik's chest tightened with a mix of relief and apprehension. He had no idea what he was getting into, but one thing was certain, he wasn't backing down. The next few days were a blur of preparations. Rose was still terrified, but she was willing to trust Malik. She opened up more about her past, the people who had betrayed her, the lies that had been spread, the web of deceit and manipulation that had brought her to where she was now. They spent hours coming up with a plan, talking about ways to protect her, to hide her, to make sure that no one would find her again. Malik, with his street smarts and determination, came up with a few ideas, but even he knew that this was far beyond what he could handle on his own. They needed help. "I have one person I can call," Rose said quietly, looking uncertain. "But I don't know if they'll even listen to me. I haven't spoken to them in years." Malik didn't hesitate. "Call them. Whoever they are. If they can help, we need them." Rose nodded, pulling out her phone. Malik didn't ask who the person was, he knew she wasn't ready to share that part of her past yet. But he trusted her, and he trusted that she would do what was best. As the phone rang, Malik's mind raced. He had no idea what they were about to face, but he knew one thing, whatever it was, they would face it together. And that, for now, was enough. The phone buzzed in Rose's hand, a sharp, sudden noise that seemed to echo through the otherwise quiet alley. She glanced at Malik, her fingers still hovering over the screen. Her face was tight with nerves, her lips pressed into a thin line. This was it, the call that could either make everything better or make it a lot worse. "You sure about this?" Malik asked, his voice steady, but he couldn't hide the flicker of concern in his eyes. He had no idea who Rose was about to call, but he knew it had to be someone from her past. Someone important. Rose nodded slowly, her eyes averted. "I don't know. It's been years. I'm not even sure they'll remember me, or if they'll care. But I can't keep running. I need help." Malik squeezed her shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. You don't have to do this alone. Whatever happens, I've got your back. With a deep breath, Rose hit the call button. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity, the seconds ticking by, each one heavier than the last. Malik watched her face, searching for any sign of emotion. Rose, however, remained a fortress of stillness, only the slightest tremor in her hand betraying her anxiety. Finally, the call was answered. Rose? A voice on the other end was sharp, crisp, and familiar, though Rose hadn't heard it in years. Is this really you? Rose closed her eyes for a moment, her breath catching. She hadn't expected it to be so easy. Hearing this voice again after so long sent a shiver down her spine. Yeah, it's me. Her voice was tentative, hesitant, but she pushed through the hesitation. I need your help. There was a pause on the other end. A long, almost unnerving silence. Rose could hear the faintest sounds of someone moving, a rustle, maybe a sigh, before the voice spoke again. You know I don't do favors for anyone anymore, Rose. What makes you think I'd help you after all these years? Rose winced, the sharp edge of the words cutting through her. She had expected resistance, but hearing it again, hearing the bitterness in their voice, stung all the same. I know, she replied quietly. But I don't have anyone else to turn to. Please. They're after me, and they won't stop until they've destroyed everything. Another long pause. Rose could almost hear the wheels turning on the other side of the phone. Finally, the voice spoke again, quieter this time. I told you once before that there's no such thing as getting out, Rose. You made your choice. You can't run forever. I know, Rose said, her voice faltering for the first time. But I can't keep hiding. I need your help to make sure they can't find me. Please. I've paid for my mistakes. I'm not that person anymore. There was a sigh, long and heavy. You never were that person, Rose. Not to me. The words landed like a bombshell, and Rose's breath caught in her throat. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared to acknowledge before, hope. All right, the voice on the other end said, finally relenting. I'll help you. But this isn't going to be easy, and you're going to owe me big for this. Rose's heart skipped a beat. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. Good. I'll send someone to you. Get ready. The call ended abruptly, leaving Rose staring at the phone in her hand, her fingers shaking slightly. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her whole body felt like it had been wound too tight, and now, with this new contact, this old ally re-entering her life, she could feel the tension easing just a little. Malik, who had been standing quietly by, waiting for the call to end, spoke now. Who was that? Who's helping us? Rose looked at him, her face a mixture of emotions, relief, uncertainty, and fear. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Someone I used to work with. An old friend, I guess, she said, her voice carefully neutral. But it's not going to be easy. They have connections everywhere, and if I'm being honest, it's a gamble. I don't even know if they'll be able to help. Malik didn't say anything right away. He could tell that Rose was reluctant to share more. Whatever this friend was, they were part of a world that Rose had left behind, a world full of secrets and danger. But Malik wasn't one to push, not now. Whatever happens, Malik said, his voice steady, we'll face it together. Rose looked at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Thank you. You don't have to do this. You could just walk away. Malik shook his head. I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone in this, Rose. Not now, not ever. Before Rose could respond, they both heard a sound, a car pulling up in the distance, the rumble of an engine growing louder. It was a sound that immediately put Rose on edge. She stood up quickly, her eyes scanning the alley, looking for any signs of danger. "That's them," she said, her voice low. "The person who's coming, they're not here to just chat." Malik's heart raced. He had no idea who this person was, but the urgency in Rose's voice told him everything he needed to know. Whatever was coming, it wasn't something they could easily escape. A car rounded the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The figure inside the car was hard to make out, but Rose's body tensed as it stopped in front of them. The door swung open, and a tall figure emerged, stepping out with purpose. "Rose," the voice called out. It was familiar, deep, and filled with authority. "It's been a long time." Rose's face tightened. "I didn't think you'd come." The person didn't smile. In fact, there was no warmth in their expression at all. "I told you once, Rose. You get in over your head, and I'll be there to clean up the mess. You just didn't think it would be this soon." Malik watched the exchange, trying to read the situation. The person was tall, well-dressed in a sharp suit, and their eyes glinted with something cold, calculating. They weren't here to help out of kindness, they were here because they had a stake in Rose's survival. But that didn't necessarily mean they were on her side. "Who is this?" Malik asked, stepping closer to Rose. His protective instincts kicked in, but Rose held up a hand, stopping him. "This is Brandon," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "One of the few people from my old life I can still trust." Brandon looked Malik over, his eyes sharp and assessing. "You must be the kid who's been hanging around with Rose. You're in deeper than you realize. But right now, I don't care about you. I care about keeping her alive." Rose looked up at Brandon, her face hardening again. "What do we need to do?" Brandon's gaze shifted toward the car. "We'll talk more inside. But first, don't trust anyone, Rose. Not even the people you think are on your side." Malik had no idea what was going on, but he could feel the tension rising. Whoever Brandon was, he wasn't someone who took things lightly. And whatever Rose had gotten herself into, it was far more dangerous than Malik had ever imagined. As the night settled in and the group moved toward the car, Malik knew one thing for sure: things were about to get a lot more complicated. The inside of the car was dark, save for the faint glow of the dashboard lights. Brandon didn't waste any time. As soon as Rose and Malik had climbed into the back seat, he started the engine, the purr of the car blending with the muffled sounds of the city outside. Rose sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed out the window, lost in thought. Malik, on the other hand, sat with his body tense, his fingers tapping nervously on the seat beside him. He didn't like the way things were unfolding. "Where are we going?" Malik asked, breaking the silence. Brandon didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained on the road, his expression unreadable. Rose glanced at Malik, but then quickly turned away again. Her lips were pressed together in a tight line, and for the first time, Malik saw the full weight of the burden she had been carrying. "We're going to a safe house," Brandon said finally, his voice as cold as the air in the car. "It's the only place we can talk without someone overhearing us." Malik wasn't sure what he was expecting, but it wasn't this. Whatever "safe house" meant, it felt far more serious than he had imagined. Rose had been through things he couldn't even begin to understand, but now, it seemed like the walls she had built around herself were starting to crack. He didn't know what to do, or if he was even helping. "Safe house?" Malik echoed, his brow furrowing. "Is this really necessary? What's going on, Rose? You still haven't told me everything." Rose finally looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and sadness. "I wish I could tell you, Malik. I do. But you don't know what you're getting into. It's not just about me anymore. There are other people involved, people you don't want to meet. The ones who want to make sure I'm gone for good." Malik shook his head, trying to process the gravity of what she was saying. "You've been running from these people all this time." Rose nodded. Yes. But now they know where I am. They've found me, Malik. And if they find me, they'll take everything. I can't let them do that to me again. The car swerved slightly as Brandon took a sharp turn onto a narrow street. Malik's heart began to race in response to the rising tension. He had been drawn into something much bigger than he had anticipated. What exactly had Rose done? Who were these people she kept talking about, and why did they want her dead? They drove in silence for a while, the only sound the steady hum of the tires on the road. Malik kept his thoughts to himself, but his mind was spinning. He looked at Rose, who was sitting motionless, her face pale and set in a grim expression. She was holding back, and Malik could sense it. There was so much more she wasn't telling him, so many secrets that were buried too deep to bring to light. After what felt like hours, the car finally pulled into an unmarked building on a quiet street. Brandon parked in the underground garage, and the three of them stepped out into the cold night air. Malik followed Rose and Brandon through a steel door that led into a dimly lit hallway. The smell of stale air and dust hit him immediately. It felt like they had just stepped into another world. "Stay close," Brandon warned, his voice low and serious. "This place isn't like the one you're used to. It's safer for now, but things can get complicated." Rose led the way, her steps quick and purposeful. They passed several rooms, all locked with heavy metal doors. Malik felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a safe house, it was a fortress. Rose must have been here before, a place she trusted when everything else fell apart. Finally, they reached a room at the end of the hallway. It was sparse, just a few chairs, a table, and a large, flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. A whiteboard covered with names and locations filled one corner, and a large map of the city was pinned above it. Whoever was in charge here had been planning something. Rose walked over to the map and ran her fingers over the locations marked in red. "This is where they've been looking for me," she said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "They've been tracking me, knowing my every move." Brandon stood in the doorway, watching them closely. "They have eyes everywhere," he said, his voice grim. "You're not safe yet. Not until we get this taken care of." Malik felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had no idea what kind of life Rose had lived, but he was starting to get an inkling of just how dangerous it was. He looked at Rose, who was now staring at the map, as though willing herself to focus. It was clear she was trying to hold it together, but Malik could see the strain on her face, the exhaustion in her eyes. "Who are these people, Rose?" Malik asked quietly, stepping closer. "Why are they doing this to you? What did you do?" Rose's eyes flickered up to meet his, and for a brief moment, Malik could see the conflict in them. She didn't want to tell him. She didn't want to drag him into this world of darkness and danger. But she was out of options now. "They're part of a larger organization," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "An organization that I was once a part of. I thought I could leave. But they don't let you leave. Once you're in for life. And they don't care who you are. They'll come after everyone you love if they have to." Malik took a step back, his mind reeling. "So you were, what? A part of some criminal group? What did they want from you?" Rose closed her eyes, her face tightening as though she were reliving something painful. "I didn't know at first. I was just a kid when I got involved. I was manipulated, made to believe that I was doing something good. But it wasn't good, Malik. It was never good. They used me, and then they turned on me when I tried to leave. I've been running ever since." Malik could see the weight of those words hanging in the air between them. Rose wasn't just running from the past, she was running from a lifetime of choices she had no control over. She had been part of something bigger, something dangerous, and now, they were coming for her, determined to finish what they had started. "And now," Rose continued, her voice barely audible, "they've found me again. And they'll stop at nothing to make sure I'm gone for good. Brandon stepped forward, his expression hard. We need to move quickly. I've already made some calls, but it's only a matter of time before they come for her. We need to figure out what we're going to do. Malik felt the weight of everything sink in. He had never imagined he would be caught up in something like this, never thought he would be the one to stand by Rose, facing down people who could destroy her life. But here he was. And the more he learned, the more he realized that he couldn't just walk away now. I'm with you, Rose, Malik said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside him. We'll get through this. Rose looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. I don't want to drag you any further into this, Malik. You don't deserve this. But Malik shook his head. I'm already in it, Rose. I'm not leaving you. Brandon watched the exchange with a silent nod, as if approving of Malik's decision. All right. We'll need to move fast. There's no more time to waste. As the three of them began to discuss their next steps, Malik couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had never signed up for any of this. But now, more than ever, he knew one thing for sure, he was going to protect Rose, no matter what it took. The safe house was silent now, save for the soft hum of the overhead lights. Malik couldn't stop his mind from racing. Every time he tried to focus, his thoughts would jump back to the same place, the conversation he had just heard. Rose, a part of something so dangerous, so dark. A life she thought she could leave behind but couldn't, no matter how hard she tried. The map on the wall seemed to mock him. Red pins scattered across it marked places where her past had left scars, somewhere in this city, somewhere near, her enemies were closing in. As Rose and Brandon discussed their next steps, Malik couldn't help but feel like an outsider in a world he was only starting to understand. He wasn't a part of this was Rose's battle. But still, he found himself standing there, feeling a pull toward something bigger than him, toward Rose. I don't get it, Malik said, unable to keep his thoughts to himself. Why didn't you just call the police? Why go through all of this secrecy, this danger? Rose's eyes met his, a flicker of pain in them. She sighed, her voice soft, but firm. It's not that simple, Malik. The people after me, they're not just criminals. They have connections everywhere. The police won't protect me from them. They'll just make things worse. Brandon leaned in, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. She's right. They have people everywhere, police, politicians, businessmen. People who would sell their own mother for a profit. The kind of power they hold, it makes the law irrelevant. Malik shook his head in disbelief. So, you're telling me that these people are untouchable? And the police can't do anything? Brandon's gaze hardened. They could, but they won't. When you're dealing with that kind of power, even the police are compromised. They're too big to take down with just a badge. Rose's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. She turned her eyes to the map again, her finger running over the red pins, but she didn't seem to see them. I tried calling for help once, but they had eyes everywhere. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people I thought I could. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Malik tried to process everything, but he felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. This wasn't some random group of criminals, this was a network, a system so entrenched that getting out was nearly impossible. And here he was, an outsider caught in the middle of it all. So, what now? Malik asked, his voice a little more urgent than before. You said we need to move fast. What's the plan? Brandon turned to him, his expression serious. We need to get Rose out of the city. If they know where she is, they'll keep hunting. We can't just wait around for them to show up. Rose looked at Malik, her eyes dark with something like regret. It's not that easy. We can't just run. They'll track me down wherever I go. They have people watching every exit, every border. I need to stop them before they make their next move. Malik felt his heart race. So, what's the plan, then? How do we stop them? If we're going up against a whole organization. We won't be going up against all of them, Brandon interrupted, his voice cool and collected. We're going after the heart of the operation. The person at the top. That's where the power lies. If we take out their leader, it'll send a message. It'll destabilize them. Malik stared at him, feeling a cold dread settle in his chest. You mean, we're going to kill someone? No, Rose said, her voice firm. Not kill. But we need to take them down, neutralize them, make sure they can't hurt anyone else. We have to do it now, before they can tighten their grip any further. Malik took a step back, his mind reeling. It felt like they were entering a whole new level of danger. This wasn't just about Rose anymore. It was about survival, his, hers, everyone's. But something about it, something about what Rose had said, nagged at him. Who exactly are we going after, Rose? Who's this person you're talking about? Rose hesitated, then slowly turned her gaze to the map again. His name is Charles Wren. He's the one who runs everything. He's the one who's controlled my life since I got involved. And now, he's the one who's hunting me down. Brandon's face remained unreadable. Wren is untouchable. He's a ghost. We can't just waltz in and take him down. He's protected by layers and layers of security. We'll need to be smart. We need to know his weaknesses. Malik felt a chill. So, we're going after the ghost himself? Rose nodded, but her expression was hard. We don't have a choice. If we don't, he'll keep coming for me, and anyone I care about, until he's taken everything. There was a heaviness in her voice that made Malik's chest tighten. He couldn't even imagine the kind of fear Rose had been living with for so long, the kind of weight she had been carrying all these years. And now, it felt like they were on the brink of doing something irreversible. But how do we even find him? Malik asked, his voice strained. If he's that protected. That's where you come in, Rose said, her eyes meeting his for the first time in a long while. There was a strange intensity in her gaze, something deeper than he had seen before. We need someone on the inside. Someone who's close enough to get the information we need. Someone who can get us access. Malik's mind raced as he tried to piece it together. You want me to get close to Wren? He asked, incredulous. You want me to go undercover, to get information from him? Are you crazy? Rose nodded, a steely look in her eyes. It's the only way. I've burned every bridge I had in that world. But you, Malik, you haven't. You can blend in, get close. You're not someone they'll expect. You're our best shot. Malik felt the weight of her words, but his mind was still spinning. But I'm not trained for this. I don't know how to get information from someone like him. This is insane. We'll teach you, Brandon said, his voice as cold and clinical as ever. You don't need to be a master of espionage. You just need to be smart. Pay attention to the details. Learn what makes them tick. And we'll be right behind you, pulling the strings. Malik's gut twisted. He was scared, more than he cared to admit. The thought of getting close to someone like Charles Wren, someone so dangerous, made his skin crawl. But what choice did he have? Rose was asking him for something huge, something he wasn't sure he could do. But he owed it to her. She had trusted him when no one else had. He couldn't let her down now. All right, Malik said, his voice low but steady. I'll do it. I'll get close to him. But after this, we're done. You don't get to drag me into this world any deeper. Rose's expression softened for a moment, a hint of relief crossing her face. Thank you, Malik. I'll make sure you're safe. I swear. Brandon didn't seem to share the same sentiment. We don't have time for promises. We're going to move quickly. If Ren catches wind of this, it's over for all of us. Malik took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. This was it. The point of no return. He was going in, and there was no going back. He had no idea what he was walking into, but he knew one thing for sure: whatever happened next, he couldn't walk away. As the group moved into action, a new weight settled over Malik. The heart of the enemy had just become his target. And now, everything rested on his ability to survive the game they were about to play. Malik's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of what he was about to do settled over him. He had never imagined himself in this position. A week ago, he was just a regular kid, trying to figure out his place in a world that seemed a little too big. Now, he was about to walk into the lion's den, pretending to be something he wasn't, for someone he barely knew. But Rose had trusted him. And in some twisted way, that trust made him feel like he had no choice. The room was dim, with only a few soft lights illuminating the map that was now strewn across the table. Rose was standing by the window, her face tight, her expression unreadable. Brandon was off to the side, tapping away on a laptop, pulling up data on Charles Wren and his organization. "We're going to need a solid backstory for you," Brandon said, breaking the silence. "We can't just throw you in there without any preparation. Wren's people are sharp. They'll catch on if anything seems off." Malik nodded, but his stomach was doing flips. He had spent the past few days getting briefed on Wren's empire, but he still didn't feel ready for what was coming. He wasn't a spy, he was just a high school kid who happened to find himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. "You've got the looks for it," Brandon continued, eyeing Malik with a calculating gaze. "You're younger, which works in our favor. Wren's operation is full of people who like to keep a low profile. Young, hungry recruits who can blend into the background. You can slip in unnoticed. You just need to convince them that you belong." Malik swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. "But how do I even start? I don't know anything about how this kind of thing works. I've never." Rose turned toward him, her voice calm but firm. "You'll learn. The most important thing is to stay calm and observe. Listen to what they say, watch how they move. They'll be looking for weakness, for signs that you don't belong. Your job is to show them that you do." Malik wasn't so sure about that. How could he convince people like that he was one of them when he had never been a part of anything like this before? "And don't forget," Rose added, "Wren's people can't know you're working against them. They'll use you until they're done with you. You have to be careful, don't make any sudden moves. If they even suspect you're not who you say you are, you're done." He nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything they were telling him. But all he could think about was how much was riding on him now. Rose, who had saved him, who had helped him when he felt lost, she was counting on him to help her get out of this nightmare. And if he failed, they were all going down. Brandon was still typing on his laptop, eyes glued to the screen. "We've got a window of opportunity. We've been monitoring Wren's movements. He's been more low-key lately, which means he's up to something. The more you know about his routine, the better your chances are of slipping in." Malik watched as Brandon pulled up a map of Wren's compound, an elaborate mansion tucked away in the suburbs. It was like something straight out of a spy movie, a huge estate, surrounded by high walls and armed guards at every entrance. Malik swallowed. Getting into a place like that was going to be a hell of a lot harder than he had anticipated. "Here's the thing," Brandon said, zooming in on the compound's layout. "We know there's a meeting coming up, a big one. Wren will be there, along with his top lieutenants. That's when you'll make your move. You need to get yourself invited to that meeting. We'll create a reason, a cover story. Once you're inside, that's when you find your angle." Malik's brow furrowed. "How the hell am I supposed to get invited to something like that? I'm just a random kid." Rose stepped forward, her eyes locking with his. "You won't be random. We'll make sure you've got the right background, the right skills. You're going to be a part of Ren's team, at least on the surface. They recruit anyone with potential. That's your in. Malik tried to steady his breath. He could feel his palms sweating. And what happens after I get in? Brandon leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Once you're in, you need to stay close to Ren. Get as much information as you can. Observe, listen, take notes. We need intel on their next big move. If we can disrupt that, we can finally put an end to this. Malik didn't need to ask what would happen if he failed. The answer was clear in both Rose and Brandon's eyes: death. Or worse. So, what's the first step? Malik asked, his voice hoarse. We've got a contact who can get you into one of their smaller operations first, Rose said. You'll be working under one of Ren's mid-level managers. You'll start by running some errands for them, getting your feet wet. It's a low-risk way to get yourself noticed without raising suspicion. Malik nodded, although he had no idea what he was really getting into. Every part of this felt like a game he was too late to understand. But if he didn't play, everyone would lose. From there, we'll give you the resources you need to make connections with the right people, Rose continued. You'll need to win their trust. And once you're in, we'll have more leverage. Malik took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. I don't know if I can do this, Rose. I don't know if I'm cut out for it. Rose's expression softened for a moment. You are, Malik. I know you are. You've already proven you've got the heart for it. Now it's just a matter of stepping up. He wasn't so sure. But the way she said it, the way she believed in him, it made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as lost as he thought. The next few days were a blur. Malik was given a new identity, a backstory to back up his cover. He learned the basics of the operation he was about to infiltrate. What to say, how to act, who to trust. But even as he tried to prepare himself, the weight of the situation never fully left him. The night before the mission, Rose and Brandon gave him one final pep talk. Rose was quieter now, more intense than he had ever seen her. She wasn't just trying to protect him anymore, she was trying to protect herself, and everyone she cared about. Malik understood that more than ever now. Stay sharp, she said. And remember, your survival depends on staying in control. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. Focus. And when the time comes, get the information we need. We can end this. Together. Malik nodded, his mind racing as he prepared to step into a world that could swallow him whole. Tomorrow, he would step into Ren's empire, and there would be no turning back. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The air was thick with tension as Malik stepped into the shadows of the compound's back entrance. The night was quiet, too quiet, as if the entire world had held its breath, waiting for something to happen. He had barely been briefed on the details of what came next. The moment he entered the building, he would no longer be Malik, the regular kid from the city. He would be someone else. Someone Ren's people would have to trust. Or, at least, believe they could trust. The weight of the earpiece in his ear buzzed softly, a reminder that Rose and Brandon were still watching over him, guiding his every move. He couldn't hear them directly, but he could feel their presence in the back of his mind, urging him forward. The guards at the gate barely gave him a second glance as he approached. He was wearing a well-tailored black suit, the kind that made him look like he belonged in a place like this. His cover story was simple. A kid looking to prove himself in the world of high-end security and protection. He had no real experience, of course, but that didn't matter. It was just a story, something to get him inside. His heart raced as he passed the first line of defense, two heavily armed men in black suits standing at the entrance. They didn't even blink as he showed them the forged credentials that Rose and Brandon had arranged. They just nodded and waved him through. "Keep your head down. Don't draw attention to yourself," Rose's voice came through the earpiece, quiet but clear. "You're just another rookie, Malik. Don't forget that." He nodded to himself, adjusting his collar as he walked deeper into the compound. The building stretched out before him, massive and intimidating, like a fortress designed to keep the outside world away. Inside, the atmosphere was sterile, almost clinical. The floors gleamed, and the lighting was cold, harsh. The place smelled like money and power. Both dangerous and intoxicating. Malik followed the signs that led him deeper into the compound, trying his best not to look too nervous. He had to appear confident, even if he felt anything but. Every turn he took, every hallway he entered, he was aware of the eyes that were on him, the people who were watching him without ever meeting his gaze. They were looking for any sign of weakness, any hint that he didn't belong. A door at the end of a long hallway slid open, and Malik stepped inside, his pulse quickening. He was in a small, high-tech security room, the kind that looked like it belonged to a secret government agency. There were multiple monitors flashing with surveillance footage from all over the compound, including the heavily guarded areas Malik hadn't even seen yet. A tall man in a sharp black suit was sitting at one of the desks, his eyes glued to the screens. He didn't look up when Malik entered, but the tension in the room was palpable. Malik's instincts told him this wasn't just any security officer. This was someone who knew how to spot a fake, someone who could tell that Malik was out of place. "New recruit?" the man asked, his voice low and gravelly. He didn't wait for an answer, his eyes still on the monitors. "You're late. Ren doesn't like people wasting his time." Malik's throat went dry. I got caught in traffic," he stammered, trying to sound confident. "First day on the job." The man barely glanced at him, but the slight lift of his brow told Malik that he wasn't entirely convinced. "Don't make me regret this," he said, before gesturing toward a chair. "Sit down. You're gonna need to start learning the ropes." Malik swallowed hard and nodded, sitting down at the desk beside him. He could feel the man's eyes on him, even though he wasn't looking directly at him. The silence in the room stretched, and Malik fought to keep his hands from shaking as he tried to blend into the background, watching the security feeds. The monitors flickered briefly before the man switched his attention to another screen. "We're expecting a shipment tonight. It's critical that nothing goes wrong. You keep your eyes on the cameras, and don't let anyone off the hook. If you see something, say something. Got it?" Malik nodded. "Got it." The next few hours passed slowly. Malik's back ached from sitting in the stiff chair, but he didn't dare move. He was too afraid of making a mistake, of doing something that would tip off the man beside him. He watched the screens, memorizing the movements of everyone in the building, keeping his mind focused on the task at hand. But his thoughts kept wandering back to Rose. What would she be doing right now? Was she safe? Had Ren's people gotten any closer to finding her? The questions gnawed at him, but he pushed them away. He couldn't afford to let his mind slip now. Not when he was so close to his goal. Around midnight, the man at the desk finally stood up, stretching his long limbs. "You're doing all right for a rookie. Ren's got a special meeting tonight, and we're expected to have the place secure. You're with me." Malik's heart leapt into his throat. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The moment he'd been preparing for. Ren was close, and Malik was about to be in the same room as the man who had been running everything from the shadows. The man led him down a maze of hallways, each more secure than the last. They passed a series of locked doors, each one marked with a symbol Malik didn't recognize. He could feel his anxiety building with each step, but he forced himself to breathe deeply. Rose had prepared him for this. He had to be calm, focused. There was no room for error. Finally, they arrived at a set of heavy double doors, guarded by two more men in suits. The man Malik had been following nodded to them, and the doors opened. Inside was a lavishly decorated conference room, the kind of place where decisions that shaped the world were made. Ren sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by a handful of his closest associates. His presence was magnetic, dangerous, but undeniably powerful. Malik's stomach twisted as he stepped into the room, trying to keep his face neutral, to keep from giving away how out of place he felt. Ren's eyes flicked over to him as he entered, a slight smirk tugging at his lips. "Ah, the new recruit," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I hear you're eager to prove yourself." Malik forced a smile. "Just here to do my job." Ren's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. "We'll see. Take a seat, and we'll begin." As Malik sat down at the far end of the table, he realized how deep he was in. There was no going back now. He had stepped into the lion's den, and if he didn't play his cards right, this could be the end of everything. The room was thick with tension. Malik could feel it in his bones, a suffocating weight that settled into his chest the moment he entered. Every step he took, every breath he drew, felt like it was happening in slow motion. Ren's presence loomed over the room, an almost palpable force that seemed to twist the air around him. He was a man who knew how to command attention without even trying. His reputation was enough to silence even the loudest voices. As Malik sat down at the long table, he tried to steady his racing heart. He was a pawn in a game far bigger than he ever could have imagined, but he had to remind himself of why he was here. This wasn't about him, it was about Rose. It was about bringing down Ren and ending the reign of terror that had been strangling them for so long. Ren's eyes lingered on Malik for a brief moment, sharp and calculating. He didn't speak right away, just watched him with an intensity that made Malik feel like he was being dissected. His mind raced, trying to think of the right thing to say, to keep up the charade, but Ren spoke first, his voice smooth and commanding. "Let's get down to business," Ren said, his gaze never leaving Malik. "You're here to prove yourself, I assume." Malik nodded, trying to sound as confident as possible. "Yes, sir. I'm ready to do whatever it takes." Ren's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. It was more like the smile of a predator eyeing its prey, and Malik couldn't help but shudder internally. "Good," Ren said. "We've got a few tasks for you. You'll be working closely with Lyle and Marie." He gestured toward two figures seated at the table, both of whom gave Malik a cold, appraising look. "They'll show you the ropes. I trust they won't have any trouble getting you up to speed." Lyle, a tall man with dark sunglasses perched on his nose even though they were indoors, barely acknowledged Malik with a curt nod. Marie, on the other hand, studied him with a quiet, penetrating gaze, as though she were trying to decide whether he was worth her time. "Start by learning how to handle our shipments," Ren continued, his voice sharp. "We have a new one coming in tomorrow night. It's a delicate operation, and I need everyone to stay sharp. Lyle, Marie, make sure he knows what to do." "Understood," Lyle said, his voice devoid of emotion. Malik tried to mask his anxiety as Ren turned his attention to the others at the table, but his mind was racing. A shipment? What did Ren mean by that? Was it the kind of business that had made him such a powerful figure? Malik knew this was his chance to learn more, to get closer to Ren's operations. But he also knew he couldn't ask too many questions. He had to remain in the background, like he belonged here, like he knew exactly what was going on. "Don't disappoint me, Malik," Ren said, his voice cold. "You're a young one, so I'll give you a chance. But you'll have to prove your worth. I don't tolerate weakness." The pressure in the room seemed to intensify as he spoke, and Malik had to force himself not to flinch. Ren had already made it clear that failure wasn't an option. And if Malik didn't prove himself quickly, he might not get another chance. As the meeting continued, Malik listened carefully to the conversations around him. There was talk of shipments, of new contacts, of deals that seemed to span across the globe. Everything Ren and his associates discussed was laced with danger: drugs, weapons, money laundering, human trafficking. The more Malik heard, the more he realized just how deep Ren's operation ran. It wasn't just a local gang, it was an empire. A criminal empire that had its fingers in every pie imaginable. Lyle and Marie didn't speak much to Malik during the meeting, but they made sure to keep him in the loop as Ren continued issuing orders. After what seemed like an eternity, the meeting finally broke up, and everyone began to file out of the room. Ren gave Malik one last, long look before he stood and turned toward the door. "You'll learn more soon enough," he said, his voice carrying a quiet, threatening undertone. "For now, stay out of trouble." Malik nodded, his stomach churning with nerves. He was no longer just an observer. He was officially a part of this dangerous world. And he had to survive. The next few hours were a blur. Lyle and Marie took Malik through the halls of the compound, showing him the ropes. It wasn't glamorous work, nothing like what Malik had imagined when he first thought about joining Ren's team. He wasn't sitting in a lavish office, making deals with high-end criminals. Instead, he was running errands, carrying messages, and doing menial tasks that left him feeling more like an errand boy than a recruit. But that was exactly what he needed. He had to stay low profile. He had to observe everything and ask as few questions as possible. He didn't want to raise suspicion, especially not now when Ren was already watching him so closely. At one point, as they were walking through a narrow hallway lined with doors that seemed to lead to rooms of unknown purpose, Marie finally spoke to him. Her voice was quiet, almost conspiratorial. "You're not like the others," she said, her eyes flicking to him. "You don't fit the usual mold. You sure you know what you're getting into?" Malik's heart skipped a beat. Had she seen through his facade? Was she onto him already? "I do," he said, trying to sound confident. "I'm here to work. I can handle whatever comes my way." Marie's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before she nodded slowly. "We'll see about that." The words hung in the air, a threat wrapped in a challenge. Malik knew this wasn't going to be easy. He had barely scratched the surface of Ren's operation, and already the people around him were starting to question his loyalty. He had to tread carefully. As the night wore on, Malik found himself in a storage room, sorting through crates filled with unmarked boxes. It was a far cry from the exciting, dangerous world he had imagined. But even here, there was something unsettling. The crates weren't filled with ordinary goods, they were packed with items that gave Malik a cold feeling in the pit of his stomach. He recognized some of the labels: drugs, weapons, equipment. These weren't just shipments. They were pieces of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle Malik was just starting to see, but had no idea how to put together. And then, as if on cue, a low voice interrupted his thoughts. "We need to talk." Malik turned around, startled. It was Marie again, her face unreadable. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the room as if making sure no one else was watching. "You're in over your head," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if you want to survive here, you need to start thinking for yourself. Don't trust anyone, not even Ren." Malik's heart raced. This was a warning, but it was also an opportunity. Was she offering him a way out? Or was she trying to pull him deeper into the web of lies that surrounded him? He didn't know who to trust anymore. But he knew one thing for certain: he had to play this game to the end, or else he wouldn't make it out alive. The warehouse smelled of metal and dust, the air thick with the weight of secrets. Malik stood at the edge of the dimly lit room, looking at the boxes around him, the hum of the fluorescent lights above casting an eerie glow on everything. Marie's words from earlier still echoed in his mind, each syllable sharp and cutting through the haze of confusion that had started to settle in his chest. "You're in over your head. But if you want to survive here, you need to start thinking for yourself. Don't trust anyone, not even Ren." Her warning had come out of nowhere, and for the first time since entering this dangerous world, Malik had the sinking feeling that he was playing a game with stakes higher than anything he could have imagined. He wasn't just working for Ren anymore. He was trapped in a web, one that stretched farther and deeper than he had ever realized. And every time he thought he understood the rules, the game changed. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady his breath, but it wasn't working. His pulse was still racing. The weight of what he'd just learned was too much to bear in that moment. He was no longer just a kid looking for revenge. He was part of something much darker, and every move he made from here on out would determine not only his fate, but the fate of everyone he cared about. The door behind him creaked open, and Malik quickly straightened up, his heart pounding in his chest. Lyle walked into the room, his hands tucked in his pockets, a lazy smile on his face. But there was something about the way he looked at Malik, a coldness in his eyes, that made the hair on the back of Malik's neck stand on end. "You okay?" Lyle asked, his voice casual, as though he hadn't just been part of a meeting that had felt like the calm before a storm. Malik nodded, though he wasn't sure if it was for his benefit or Lyle's. "Yeah. Just thinking." Lyle tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You'd better keep thinking. Things are gonna get a lot harder from here on out." He stepped further into the room, glancing at the crates stacked against the walls. "You're with us now. That means you get to see things that the rest of the world doesn't." Malik forced a smile, even though every nerve in his body was screaming at him to run. He wasn't sure where this was going, but he knew that he couldn't let himself show any sign of weakness. Not in front of Lyle, not in front of anyone. "What do you mean?" Malik asked, his voice carefully neutral. Lyle gave a short laugh, like he found the question amusing. "You're about to find out. We've got a shipment coming in tonight. I need someone who can keep their mouth shut and do what they're told. You think you're up for it?" Malik swallowed hard, nodding. This was it, the first real test of his loyalty. And as much as he hated to admit it, he knew he couldn't afford to fail. He had to keep up the act, stay in control, and play the part of the loyal recruit. If he screwed this up, there would be no going back. Lyle smiled, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "Good. Let's get moving, then." The night air was cool as they stepped outside, the scent of rain lingering in the breeze. Malik followed Lyle through a narrow alley, trying to stay focused on the task at hand. They passed a few other members of Ren's crew, their eyes flicking over to Malik with a mixture of indifference and suspicion. It was clear that he wasn't fully trusted yet, but Lyle seemed to think he was worth the investment. "Stay close," Lyle muttered, as they approached a black van parked at the end of the alley. "This shipment's important. We don't have time for mistakes." Malik nodded, his stomach tightening. The night was about to take a dark turn, and he had no idea what he would find when they arrived at the drop-off point. But one thing was certain, whatever was in those crates wasn't just merchandise, it was the lifeblood of Ren's empire. And Malik was right in the middle of it. They drove for what felt like an eternity, the city lights flickering past them as they moved deeper into the industrial district. Malik couldn't help but feel the weight of the world pressing down on him, the sense that every move he made was being watched by someone, somewhere. It was as if the very air around him was alive with danger. Lyle didn't say much during the ride, his eyes focused on the road, his face unreadable. Malik used the time to process everything he had learned in the past few hours, everything that had been said, every subtle look and every word that seemed insignificant at the time but now carried new meaning. As they neared their destination, Malik's mind wandered back to Ren and his associates. The more he thought about them, the more he realized how little he truly knew. Ren had a way of controlling everything around him, from his inner circle to the way people in the streets treated him like a god. But there was something off about him. Something that made Malik uneasy. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface. When they finally arrived, Malik's thoughts were interrupted as Lyle slammed on the brakes, pulling the van to a stop in front of an abandoned warehouse. The area was deserted, the buildings towering like hollow shells in the darkness. Malik felt a shiver run down his spine as he looked around, wondering just how deep Ren's influence stretched. "This is it," Lyle said, his voice low. Get out. Keep your eyes open. Malik did as he was told, stepping out of the van and following Lyle toward the entrance of the warehouse. The door was already cracked open, and the sound of muffled voices echoed from within. As they stepped inside, the lights flickered on, revealing a group of men unloading crates from the back of a truck. There was a sense of urgency in the air, like they were on the clock, and no one had time for delays. Lyle led Malik toward the group, his eyes scanning the men with practiced precision. "You, over there," he said, pointing to a burly man near the truck. "Take the crate to the office. Make sure it's handled carefully." Malik's heart raced as he stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for one of the crates. The weight of it surprised him, it was heavier than he had expected. As he hoisted it up, the man beside him gave him a nod of approval. "Good. Keep moving," the man said gruffly, and Malik nodded, following his lead as they moved deeper into the warehouse. The crates were stacked high, the air thick with the smell of sweat and metal. It was clear that whatever Ren was moving tonight, it wasn't just goods, it was power. Control. And Malik had to figure out how to survive in the middle of it. As he moved through the maze of crates, he caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold, a symbol etched into the side of one of the crates. It was the same symbol that Ren's people had been using in their operations for years. The same symbol that had been on the sealed documents he had intercepted earlier. It was a message. And Malik knew, without a doubt, that he was about to uncover something much darker than he could have ever imagined. The weight of the crate in Malik's hands seemed to increase with every step he took, as though it were a burden too heavy to bear. His pulse quickened, and his mind raced as he followed the group of men deeper into the warehouse. The symbol on the crate, the same one he had seen earlier, kept flashing in his mind. It felt like a warning, like something far darker than simple contraband was hidden inside these walls. Malik glanced over at Lyle, who was speaking with one of the men unloading the truck. Lyle's face was calm, almost unnervingly so, but Malik could see the tension in his jawline, the slight narrowing of his eyes. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a simple exchange of goods. There was more going on here, things Malik couldn't even begin to understand yet. They reached a corner of the warehouse, a quiet section where several men were gathered around a small table. The crates were being stacked with military precision, and the men moved quickly, with no room for error. Malik's eyes flicked nervously to the men as he carefully placed the crate on the floor, trying to avoid drawing attention to himself. "This is where you'll stay for now," Lyle said, his voice low. He shot a look at Malik, his expression unreadable. "Watch what's happening here. And remember, don't ask questions. Just follow orders." Malik nodded, trying to keep his anxiety in check. This was more than just a test of loyalty. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous, something that could unravel everything he had worked for. Ren had always been a mystery, but now Malik was beginning to see the cracks in the facade. The men continued to unload crates, and Malik's eyes fell once again on the symbol, the one that had appeared on the crate he was carrying. He had to know what it meant. He had to find out what was really going on. As he moved toward the back of the warehouse to stay out of sight, a sudden noise interrupted his thoughts. It was a muffled thud, followed by a low voice. Malik tensed, his senses going on high alert. He couldn't risk being caught snooping, but curiosity drove him closer to the sound. He rounded a corner and saw two men standing in front of a steel door. One of the men, a hulking figure with tattoos covering his arms, was speaking to another man in a hushed voice. "Make sure no one sees the shipment tonight," the tattooed man muttered, his voice rough. "Ren's orders. He doesn't want anyone knowing about this." The second man nodded, clearly nervous. "Are you sure it's safe? Last time." "I don't care about last time. You keep quiet." "If anyone asks, we don't know anything about it," the tattooed man snapped. He turned to leave, but before he did, his gaze flicked toward the shadows where Malik was standing. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He knew he had to act fast. If they saw him, everything was over. He quickly ducked behind a stack of crates, his breath coming in short bursts. His mind raced. What were they talking about? Ren had given specific orders. What was it that had to be kept secret? Why was this shipment so important? The door they had been guarding seemed to be the focal point of their conversation. Malik's curiosity got the better of him, and without thinking, he slowly crept closer, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The door was heavy, its surface scratched and weathered. It had a strange, almost sinister feel to it, like a gateway to something Malik wasn't prepared for. He couldn't resist. He had to see what was behind it. As he approached, he noticed the small security panel beside the door. There was a keypad, but it was old and rusty. Malik hesitated for a moment, weighing the risk. He wasn't supposed to be snooping around, but his instincts told him that whatever was behind that door could be the key to understanding everything that was happening in this place. The silence around him was deafening. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears as he reached out, gently pressing a finger to the keypad. It buzzed in response, the screen flashing green. Malik didn't have time to question it. He pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. What he saw next sent a chill down his spine. Behind the door was a small, windowless room, lit by a single flickering bulb. It looked like a storage space, but what it held wasn't anything like the crates full of drugs and weapons that filled the rest of the warehouse. No, this room was different. It was full of high-tech equipment, computers, monitors, wires snaking across the floor, and papers scattered across the desk in the center. The air smelled faintly of plastic and chemicals, a stark contrast to the musky, industrial scent of the rest of the warehouse. Malik's eyes landed on a small box in the corner of the room. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. An old, dusty wooden chest with strange markings carved into its surface. The symbols on the chest matched the one he had seen earlier on the crate. The connection hit Malik like a punch to the gut. This chest wasn't just a piece of random inventory, it was a part of something far bigger. His hand instinctively moved toward it, but before he could touch the box, a voice behind him stopped him dead in his tracks. "What are you doing here?" Malik spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. It was Marie. Her face was unreadable, her eyes sharp as she looked at him. She had appeared out of nowhere, and for a moment, Malik wondered if she had been watching him the entire time. I wasn't," Malik stammered, trying to find a way to explain himself. Marie didn't wait for him to finish. She stepped forward, her expression hardening. "You should have stayed out of this, Malik. You don't know what you're getting into." Malik's mind raced. He couldn't back down now. He had to know what this was about. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. "What's behind all of this?" Marie's eyes flicked to the chest, and for the briefest moment, Malik saw something flicker in her gaze, something that was almost fear. "This," she said quietly, "is not something you want to get involved with. You have no idea what Ren is really doing here. If you want to survive, you need to forget everything you've seen. Forget about this room, forget about the crates, forget about the symbols. This is bigger than you. Bigger than all of us." Malik took a step forward, ignoring the cold feeling creeping up his spine. "No. I'm not going to just walk away. You know something, don't you? What's in that chest? What's Ren really up to?" Marie hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low, urgent whisper. "You have no idea what you're asking. Ren's empire isn't just about power and money. It's about control, control over something that's far more dangerous than you realize. You've only seen the surface. The deeper you go, the less chance you have of ever getting out." Malik felt the weight of her words like a ton of bricks, but he wasn't ready to back down. He wasn't going to walk away from this. He needed answers. "I don't care how deep it is," Malik said, his voice firm. "I'm in this now. And I'll find out what it is." Marie's eyes flicked to the chest one last time before she turned and left the room without another word. The silence in the room felt suffocating after Marie had left. Malik stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the chest in front of him. The uncertainty of everything, his position in this world, the cryptic warnings from Marie, the dangerous path he had chosen to follow, seemed to press down on him with an unbearable weight. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and questions that felt like they were pulling him in every direction. The strange chest, with its mysterious symbols, sat in front of him, taunting him with its secrets. His fingers twitched, the desire to uncover the truth burning in his chest. He had already crossed a line by coming in here, and he knew there was no turning back. The knowledge he would gain from opening that chest could change everything. But it also had the power to destroy him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. The warning signs were everywhere, Marie's fear, the secrecy surrounding the chest, but still, something compelled him to move forward. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected, that this chest was the key to understanding Ren's true intentions. Malik stepped closer, his hands trembling as he placed them on the chest. The wood was smooth, worn with age, and cold to the touch. The symbols carved into it felt like they were alive, almost pulsating with a strange energy. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting someone to walk in at any moment, but the room remained eerily still. Slowly, Malik lifted the lid of the chest. Inside was a stack of files, yellowed with age, and a strange metallic device at the bottom, unlike anything Malik had ever seen. It looked almost like a high-tech tablet, but with an array of buttons and switches on its surface, far more advanced than anything he'd encountered. The files were neatly stacked, and as Malik reached for them, a sense of dread settled in his stomach. This wasn't just a normal shipment. This was something much, much bigger. He carefully pulled the first file from the top of the stack, his fingers brushing against the paper. The file was labeled simply, Project Blackout. His heart skipped a beat as he opened it. The first page was filled with a series of numbers, charts, and diagrams that made no sense to Malik at first. But as he scanned the pages, the words began to take shape, and he felt a chill creep over him. The documents outlined a highly classified operation, involving powerful figures from around the world, politicians, military leaders, corporate moguls, and all of them were connected by one thing, Ren. Ren wasn't just a street-level kingpin. He was a player in a much larger game. Project Blackout wasn't just about making money or controlling territory, it was about creating an underground network of influence that stretched across borders, across industries, and across governments. Malik's mind reeled as he pieced together the fragments of information. Ren had been working on this project for years, building a covert empire that manipulated world events from the shadows. The chest, the crates, the symbols. They were all part of a much larger plan. And Malik was right in the middle of it. But that wasn't all. The final pages of the file revealed something even more terrifying. A series of names were listed, names of people who were either compromised or being blackmailed into cooperating with Ren. Some of the names were familiar, politicians and businessmen who had made headlines in recent years. Others were far less known but equally dangerous in their own right. And at the bottom of the list was one final name that sent a cold shiver down Malik's spine. Marie Westbrook. Malik froze, his hands shaking as he processed what he had just read. Marie. She was involved in all of this. She had warned him to stay away, told him that he didn't understand what was happening, but she was just as deep in the conspiracy as anyone else. The realization hit him hard. Marie wasn't just a bystander or an innocent informant, she was part of this world. She had to have known what was going on, even if she hadn't been able to tell him everything. And now, here he was, holding the key to something much bigger than he had ever imagined. His mind raced. Should he confront her? Should he tell Lyle? No. He couldn't trust anyone, not now. Ren had eyes everywhere, and one wrong move could cost him everything. He needed to be smart. He needed to gather more information before making any decisions. As Malik stared at the file, a low buzzing noise interrupted his thoughts. It was coming from the strange metallic device at the bottom of the chest. He reached for it cautiously, the device cold under his fingertips. It hummed to life as he pressed a button on the side, and a holographic display flickered to life in front of him. What he saw made his stomach drop. The hologram projected a series of images, blueprints, city maps, and satellite images, but there was one image that stood out above all the rest. It was a map of a high-security facility. The location was marked with a red dot, and a large red X was drawn over it, indicating that it was a priority target. The name of the facility was listed as Dawn Facility. Dawn Facility? Malik had never heard of it before. But something about the name felt ominous. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was another part of Ren's plan, something that needed to be dealt with. Suddenly, Malik's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing through the warehouse. His heart leapt in his chest. Someone was coming. He quickly closed the chest, trying to steady his breathing. The room felt too small, too confined, as if the walls were closing in on him. His mind raced. He had to hide. He couldn't afford to get caught now. Not with all this knowledge, not with everything that was at stake. Malik darted toward the back of the room, ducking behind a stack of crates just as the door creaked open. He held his breath, his body pressed flat against the cold concrete floor. The footsteps grew louder, closer. He didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. Through the small gap between the crates, Malik could make out the figure that entered. It was Lyle. He was scanning the room with a calculating look, his eyes darting around, searching for something, or someone. Malik's heart skipped a beat. Was Lyle onto him? Lyle walked toward the chest and stopped in front of it. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, his hand hovering over the lid. Then, with a shrug, he turned and left the room without saying a word. Malik let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His chest was tight, and his body was coated in a cold sweat. He had narrowly avoided being discovered. But something told him that this was only the beginning. The more he uncovered, the more dangerous it would get. The truth was out there, and Malik was getting closer to it. But with each step forward, he felt the noose tightening around him. Malik sat in the dark, the warehouse around him buzzing with low activity. He could hear the distant clinking of metal and the muffled voices of workers deep in conversation, but his mind was far from these distractions. It was racing with thoughts of the chest, the holographic map, and the name Dawn Facility that had haunted him since he first saw it. The more he thought about it, the more urgent the situation became. This wasn't just about Ren's operation or the money and power he'd been chasing for years. It was something far darker, something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Ren's empire stretched far beyond the streets. What was Dawn Facility? What was so important that even someone like Lyle, someone who had been close to Ren for years, had to be so careful? Malik rubbed his forehead, the weight of the files he'd uncovered still pressing heavily on his chest. He knew he couldn't stay here for long. He had to act. He had to learn more about Dawn Facility, and to do that, he needed more information. But the deeper he dug, the more exposed he became. The stakes were rising with every passing hour, and every person around him seemed like a potential threat. Just then, the sound of approaching footsteps broke Malik out of his thoughts. He quickly ducked behind a stack of crates, his pulse racing. The footsteps drew nearer, and he strained his ears to listen. It was Lyle again. Lyle's voice called softly, but his tone was different this time, sharp, direct, like a question that hadn't been answered yet. Malik remained perfectly still, hardly breathing, as Lyle's footsteps stopped just inches away from his hiding place. Malik, I know you're in here. I can hear you breathing. Malik's stomach dropped. He could feel his heart hammering in his chest. Had Lyle somehow figured out that he had been snooping? Was this the end of the line for him? Lyle's voice came again, this time softer, more contemplative. I've been watching you. You've got that look on your face, that I need answers look. You're asking too many questions, Malik. And I think you're starting to find things out that you shouldn't. Malik stayed silent, hoping against hope that Lyle wouldn't find him. But the tension in the air was thick, and the silence stretched too long, leaving Malik with only his own racing thoughts for company. I know what you found, Lyle continued, his voice almost a whisper now. I know about the chest. I know about the files. And I know you're thinking of going further, trying to find out what Ren's really doing. But here's the thing, Malik. Lyle paused, and for a moment, Malik wondered if the man was toying with him, enjoying the tension between them. Then he heard Lyle's next words, and they sent a shiver through his spine. You don't want to know. Lyle's voice was cold, low, like a predator warning its prey. Some things are better left untouched. I'm not trying to scare you, but you need to realize something. You're not just playing with fire. You're dealing with a power that goes beyond anything you can imagine. And I'm not talking about money or drugs. This is something much bigger. Malik held his breath, his body tense with a mix of fear and curiosity. Was Lyle being sincere? Or was he trying to scare Malik off, keep him from discovering the truth? I'm not afraid of the truth, Malik replied quietly, his voice low but resolute. Whatever it is, I'll face it. But I need to know. I need to know what's going on. What's really behind all of this? There was a long pause before Lyle answered, and Malik could hear him shifting his weight, as if considering something. You think you do, Lyle finally said, his voice almost sorrowful. But you don't, Malik. You don't understand what you're asking for. You can't just walk into this world and expect to understand it. Ren is untouchable. His influence, his network, it's all too big. You think you can stop him, but the truth is, you're just one person. You can't change anything. Malik clenched his jaw, his fists tightening at his sides. This was the moment where most people would give up, where they would turn around and walk away, scared off by the threat and the warning. But Malik wasn't most people. And he wasn't about to let fear dictate his actions. You're wrong, Malik said, his voice steady despite the doubt that crept into his mind. I'm not afraid of Ren. I'm not afraid of anyone. I need to know what's behind Dawn Facility. I need to understand why it's so important. Lyle's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Malik saw something almost like hesitation in the older man's expression. You're too deep now, Malik, Lyle said, his voice grim. You really think you can get out of this? The deeper you go, the more you'll realize that there's no way out. You're already tangled in a web that you can't escape. Ren is a part of something that's bigger than all of us. Malik didn't respond right away. He was listening, processing Lyle's words. But the more Lyle spoke, the more Malik realized that this wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Lyle wasn't just concerned for Malik's safety. He was warning him because he knew that Malik was getting too close to something Ren didn't want anyone to uncover. I don't care how deep it is, Malik said, finally turning to face Lyle, his voice steady but firm. I can't walk away now. I need to know what's going on. And I need your help, Lyle. If you know anything, if you can tell me something, anything at all, now's the time. Lyle's face softened for just a moment, and Malik saw a flicker of something almost like regret in his eyes. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it was enough to give Malik pause. Lyle wasn't the stone-cold, untouchable man he had appeared to be all this time. I can't help you, Lyle said finally, his voice quiet but resolute. You'll figure it out on your own. But just remember, when it all falls apart, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. Without another word, Lyle turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the warehouse, leaving Malik standing alone in the shadows. Malik's heart was pounding, and he knew the game had changed. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It wasn't even about taking down Ren. Now, it was about finding out what Dawn Facility really was and why it was worth so much to people like Ren and Lyle, who were willing to risk everything to keep it hidden. The deeper Malik dug, the more dangerous this game became. But he wasn't about to back down. He had come too far. Malik's mind raced as he watched Lyle disappear into the shadows of the warehouse. There was no turning back now. The truth was out there, buried under layers of deception and danger. He had to keep pushing forward. The deeper he dug, the more tangled the web became, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't let himself be the one to walk away, not now, not when the pieces were finally starting to fit together. He glanced back at the chest, where the files and the strange device still lay, beckoning him towards something he didn't yet fully understand. It felt like a choice, one path that led to answers, but at a cost. And another that led to safety, but left him with questions that would haunt him forever. Malik took a deep breath. The decision had already been made. He had to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. As he left the warehouse, the cool night air hit him, clearing his thoughts, even if only momentarily. The streets were quiet, almost unnervingly so. In the distance, the faint hum of city life drifted in, but it felt distant, far removed from the chaos and secrets Malik was now a part of. He had no idea where to go next. The name Dawn Facility had been etched in his mind ever since he had seen it on the holographic map, but it was just a name. No address, no other clues. He needed more. He needed to find someone who knew what it was, and preferably, someone who could tell him how to get in. That's when a thought struck him. Marie. She had been involved in this from the beginning. She knew more than she had let on. If anyone could help him find the next piece of the puzzle, it was her. Malik's heart beat a little faster as he pulled out his phone. He hadn't seen Marie in days. After their last conversation, she had seemed distant, guarded. But maybe, just maybe, now was the time to reach out. His thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before he hit the dial button. The phone rang once, twice, and then she picked up. Malik? Her voice was tight, cautious. What's going on? Why are you calling me? Malik hesitated. He had to be careful. He didn't know if she could be trusted anymore, not after everything he had uncovered. But there was no one else. I need to talk to you, Malik said, trying to keep his tone steady. I found something big. And I think you know what it is. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Malik could hear her breathing, slow and steady, as if weighing her options. Then, finally, she spoke. You shouldn't have gone digging, Malik, she said softly, almost regretfully. You've already gone too far. You don't know what you're dealing with. I'm not turning back, Malik shot back, his voice firm. I need to know about Dawn Facility. It's important. You know something about it. You have to. Marie didn't answer right away. The silence between them felt heavy, thick with the unspoken things neither of them wanted to say. Finally, her voice broke through. Meet me at the usual place, she said quietly. I'll tell you everything I can. But you need to be prepared. Once you know, there's no going back. Malik felt a shiver of unease wash over him, but it was followed by a rush of determination. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of what Marie had to say, not of what was coming. He had come too far to back down. I'll be there, he said, before hanging up. The usual place was a small, out-of-the-way cafe on the outskirts of the city, dark and quiet, a perfect spot for clandestine meetings. Malik knew it well. He had been here with Marie before, though the conversations they'd shared had been light, fleeting. But today was different. Today, they would confront the truth. When he arrived, he spotted her immediately. She was sitting in a booth in the corner, her dark eyes fixed on the door, waiting. She looked more tired than usual, more worn. Her face was pale, the faint traces of worry etched across her features. She didn't look like someone who had been part of a conspiracy. She looked like someone who was trapped in one, just like him. Malik slid into the booth across from her. "Marie," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I'm ready to hear the truth." Marie met his gaze, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite place. She took a deep breath, as though gathering strength, and then nodded. "I didn't want you to get involved in this," she said slowly. "But you're right. You deserve to know what's really going on. And the truth is, well, it's far more complicated than I ever thought it would be." She leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower, as if she feared someone might be listening. Dawn Facility isn't just a name. It's a research facility, a secret one, buried deep beneath the surface. It's part of a larger operation that Ren has been running for years, a project that goes far beyond anything you or I could have imagined. And Malik, it's not just about drugs, money, or power. This is about control over people, over nations, over the entire world. Malik's mind raced as he processed her words. He had known it was big, but this was something else entirely. "Control?" he repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "What do you mean? What does Ren have to do with something like that?" Marie hesitated again, her eyes darting around the cafe before she continued. "Ren is involved in something far more dangerous than you think. Dawn Facility is working on experiments that could change everything. They're manipulating genetics, testing new forms of control over the human mind. The people involved in it, Ren's partners, they've been manipulating world events, causing chaos to cover up what they're really doing." Malik felt his breath catch in his throat. He had suspected something big, but this? The idea of genetic manipulation, mind control, this was beyond anything he could have imagined. "And you've been working with them?" Malik's voice was low, laced with a mixture of anger and betrayal. Marie flinched, but then nodded, her gaze falling to the table. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "None of us did. We're all tied into this, whether we want to be or not." Malik's mind was spinning, his thoughts tumbling over one another in a dizzying blur. Ren, the experiments, the manipulation, they were all part of something far more sinister than anything he had ever expected. But there was one question left. One question that lingered, unanswered. "Why did you warn me?" Malik asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "Why didn't you just tell me all of this earlier?" Marie's gaze met his again, and this time, there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, regret, fear, but also resolve. "Because I didn't want you to end up like me," she said softly. "But now it's too late. We're in this together, Malik. And the only way out is to tear it all down." Malik swallowed hard. He had no idea how they were going to do it, but there was no turning back now. The truth was out in the open. And every choice he made from here on out, would have consequences. The web was tightening around him, and he was already caught in its threads. The air in the cafe felt thick, heavy with the weight of the truth Marie had just revealed. The revelation about Dawn Facility, the genetic manipulation, the mind control, it was a lot to process. But one thing was clear, Malik was no longer just a bystander in this twisted game. He had been pulled in deeper than he ever imagined, and there was no escaping the danger now. Marie's eyes were locked on him, her face drawn with anxiety. He could see the exhaustion in her features, the toll that working for someone like Ren had taken on her. But there was something else there too, resolve. She was in this now, and despite everything, she was determined to tear down the monstrous system she had become a part of. "Malik," she said quietly, breaking the silence, "I know this is a lot to take in. But I need you to understand one thing, Dawn Facility isn't just a lab. It's a symbol. It's a key to a much larger agenda. Ren and his partners, they're not just experimenting on people. They're trying to create a world where they control everything. And if they succeed, no one will be free. Malik absorbed her words, his mind still grappling with the enormity of it all. But beneath the shock and disbelief, something else stirred inside him, a fierce, burning determination. The stakes had gone from personal to global. Ren's operation wasn't just about him, or Marie, or even the lives of the people they knew. This was about the future of the entire world. And no matter how deep it went, Malik knew he couldn't back down. "Then we stopped them," Malik said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside him. Marie looked at him, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It was a look of surprise, of relief, but also of doubt. She had seen too much to believe that anyone could truly take down Ren. But Malik wasn't backing down. Not now. "I don't know how we can," she said quietly. "This is bigger than us, Malik. Ren has people everywhere. There's no way we can just waltz into Dawn facility and expect to bring it down. We don't have the resources, the manpower. We don't even know where it is exactly. And we have the map," Malik interrupted, his voice firm. "I have the chest, the files, and the map. Dawn facility has to be somewhere. We just need to find it, get inside, and gather the evidence. Once we have that, we can expose everything." Marie was silent for a moment, her gaze flicking from Malik to the darkened street outside. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and Malik could tell she was weighing his words carefully, considering the implications of what he was suggesting. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter than before, almost reluctant. "You're right," she said softly. "The map is our best chance. But it's not going to be easy. Ren's people will be watching. They won't just let us walk in and take what we need. And even if we do get in, who's to say we'll be able to escape?" Malik's jaw tightened. He knew she was right, but that didn't change anything. There were no guarantees in life. But there was one thing he did know, he couldn't walk away. "I'm not backing down, Marie," Malik said, his voice unwavering. "If we don't try, we're as good as dead anyway. And I'd rather die fighting for the truth than sit back and let Ren get away with it." She met his gaze then, her eyes intense, searching for any hint of doubt, any sign that Malik was just caught up in the moment, too naive to see the full picture. But what she found was a man determined to see this through, no matter the cost. "I never thought I'd hear you say that," Marie said quietly, a flicker of admiration in her voice. "All right then. We'll do this. But you need to understand something, Malik. I don't have all the answers. We'll need help. People who know how to get past the security, who know where the facility is, who can get us inside without getting caught." Malik's eyes narrowed as he thought about it. He didn't know who they could trust anymore, not after everything he had learned. But there was one person who might know how to handle this, someone who had been a part of the criminal underground for years, someone who had a reputation for pulling off impossible jobs. "Lyle," Malik said suddenly, his voice thoughtful. "He knows things. He might be our best shot at getting inside." Marie looked at him sharply, her brow furrowing. "Lyle? Are you sure about that? He's not exactly a friend." "I know," Malik said with a grim smile. "But we don't have the luxury of making friends right now. He knows the game better than anyone. If there's a way into Dawn facility, he'll know it." Marie hesitated. "But he's dangerous, Malik. He's not someone you can trust, not even for a second." "I don't trust him," Malik replied. "But I don't need to. I just need him to help us get in. After that, we're on our own." Marie let out a long breath, as if trying to decide whether or not to agree. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Okay. But if this goes south, we can't say we weren't warned. Lyle's not someone you can rely on when things get tough." Malik understood the risks, but he had no other choice. If they were going to get into Dawn facility, they needed Lyle's expertise. They needed someone who could navigate the shadows and get them in without leaving a trace. We'll need to find him first, Malik said. I'll track him down. You stay here and gather the rest of the information. We'll meet back up soon. Marie nodded, but her eyes were still filled with doubt. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. But the truth was out, and there was no going back. They were in this together now. And even if it meant facing the darkest corners of their world, they had to press on. Malik stood, his hand briefly resting on the table before he turned and headed for the door. He was already mentally preparing himself for what came next. Lyle wasn't going to make it easy, but that was exactly what he was counting on. The harder it was to get in, the more chance they had of getting out without anyone noticing. As he stepped into the cool night, Malik's mind raced. The pieces were finally starting to fall into place. Ren's empire, Dawn facility, the experiments, it was all connected. And now, he had a plan. They just had to survive long enough to see it through. The night was darker than usual as Malik made his way through the deserted streets. His footsteps echoed in the silence, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing inside his mind. There was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and with it came a heavy weight, one that seemed to press down on him, suffocating his every move. But the weight was also a burden of clarity. He knew what needed to be done, and that was the only thing that kept him going. The road ahead was treacherous. The closer he got to finding Lyle, the more nervous he became. They had no time to waste. He couldn't afford another delay. But tracking down Lyle wouldn't be easy. The man lived in the shadows, a ghost in the system. And if Malik was going to get the answers they needed, he had to confront him head-on. Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. He pulled it out quickly, seeing Marie's name on the screen. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "What's up?" he asked, his voice gruff. "You're not going to like this," Marie said, her tone serious. "I did some digging on my end, and I found something that makes Lyle even more dangerous than we thought." Malik's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" Marie took a deep breath. "Lyle's been working with Ren for a long time. I don't know the details, but I found evidence that connects him directly to the project at Dawn facility. He's not just some random criminal we can use. He's part of the system." The revelation hit Malik like a punch to the gut. All this time, he had assumed Lyle was a necessary evil, someone they could manipulate, someone who could help them take down Ren's empire. But now, the truth was undeniable, Lyle was tangled in the same web they were trying to escape. He wasn't their ally. He was just as much a part of the problem as Ren himself. Malik's pulse quickened. He couldn't afford to be fooled by Lyle's charm or his expertise. If they were going to use him, they had to be careful. They couldn't let their guard down, not even for a second. "What do we do now?" Malik asked, trying to steady his voice. "We can't trust him. But we still need him to get into Dawn facility. Do you have any other leads?" "I've been looking," Marie said, her voice tight. "There's a person in the underground network who might be able to help, a hacker who has access to the Dawn facility database. If we can get to him, we might be able to bypass security, find out where the facility is, and how to infiltrate it." Malik thought for a moment. He wasn't sure how much more he could handle. Each revelation seemed to drag him deeper into the darkness, and yet, there was no other choice. The stakes were too high. They had to keep pushing forward, even if it meant facing things they were unprepared for. "Do you know how to find this hacker?" Malik asked. "I do," Marie said. "But it's risky. He's not someone who's easily found. We'll need to track him down carefully, and we can't afford to alert Ren's people. I'll gather the details and let you know where to meet him." "All right," Malik said, his voice determined. "Keep me posted." He ended the call and pocketed the phone. His mind was still reeling, but there was no time for doubt. He had made it this far, and he wasn't about to stop now. Lyle was a complication, but one they had to deal with. They would use him, just long enough to get inside Dawn facility, but after that, all bets were off. The next morning, Malik found himself in the heart of the city, moving quickly through the crowded streets. The sun was barely up, but the city was already buzzing with activity. He had a meeting with Lyle, and time was running out. He found Lyle in his usual spot, a rundown bar on the edge of town, tucked between two abandoned buildings. It was a place where deals were made and broken in equal measure. Malik pushed the door open and stepped inside. The dim light inside made his eyes adjust slowly, and he could hear the soft murmur of voices in the back. Lyle was sitting at a corner booth, a drink in front of him, his face shadowed by the low light. Malik didn't waste time. He walked straight to the booth and sat down without a word. Lyle didn't even look up at first. He took a long sip of his drink, savoring it, as if he had all the time in the world. Finally, he looked up at Malik, his eyes narrowing. "You've got guts showing up here, Malik," Lyle said, his voice smooth but laced with a certain edge. "I thought you'd be long gone by now." "I need your help," Malik said flatly, cutting straight to the point. "I know about Dawn facility. I know what it is. And I need you to get me inside." Lyle's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, surprise, maybe? Or perhaps just curiosity. "You're asking the wrong guy for that," Lyle replied, leaning back in his seat. "You've got it all wrong, Malik. You don't want to be involved in that place. People who go looking for Dawn facility end up dead." "I don't care," Malik said, his voice hard. "I don't have a choice. I need to know what's going on in there. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking for your help." Lyle studied him for a long moment, his eyes calculating. Malik could see the gears turning in his head. He was weighing the options, whether to walk away or to take the risk. Finally, Lyle spoke again. "I don't usually do favors for people, especially not for people like you," he said, his voice quieter now. "But maybe, just maybe, we can make a deal." Malik's stomach tightened. He had known this was coming. Lyle never helped anyone for free. "What do you want?" Malik asked, his voice steady. Lyle smiled, a crooked, almost predatory grin. "I want you to do something for me. Something small. You help me with a little business, and I'll get you what you need. But I don't work for free. Understand?" Malik took a breath. This was the moment. This was the deal. He couldn't afford to hesitate. "I'm listening," Malik said. Lyle leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You get me into Dawn facility." Malik's heart skipped a beat. "You want to go in there too?" Lyle's smile widened. "I'm not going in for fun, Malik. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. You'll help me, and I'll help you." Malik's mind raced. The deal was dangerous, but he had no other choice. He needed Lyle, and in return, he was willing to make the sacrifice. They had no time to waste. "Fine," Malik said, his voice firm. "You've got a deal. But you keep your end of the bargain. No tricks." Lyle gave a small, satisfied nod. "You'll get what you need. But remember, you asked for this." Malik could feel the gravity of the situation sinking in. The pieces were falling into place, but the final outcome was still uncertain. He had made his choice. Now, it was time to see it through. The countdown had begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?